Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together, and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now let's get honest today. Have you ever said to yourself, I've got it all figured out before you had kids? I will never do that. And now that you have kids, well, you do. I need to time out, a nap, a break. I may look like I've got it all together, but inside I'm a hot mess. Actually, I am a hot mess on the outside too. What is on my shirt? Am I good enough, doing it right? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with these children? Are they 18 yet? Well, you've come to the right place. Today, there is no reason to get your zip-up pants on or even a clean shirt. You don't have to brush your hair or even pretend that everything is just fine. Thank you very much. You are among friends who get it deeply. Today, we are talking about parenting without perfection and a whole bunch of other really important issues that are often left unsaid. There will be an open confession that, as it says in my next guest book, the happy family life is supposed to be messy. A lifestyle of only perfect moments is not a lifestyle I'm familiar with, nor is it one in which kids can really thrive. Who are we doing this fabulous episode with? Well, she doesn't know it yet, but as I was reading her book, I thought, I could be best friends with this person. Let's see if we can make that happen. And this new bestie's name is Kristin Howerton. Kristin Howerton is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the mother of 4 children within 4 years via birth and adoption. She is the founder of the blog Rage Against the Minivan, where in the midst of writing about the raw emotions and experience of motherhood, she has become a fierce advocate for social justice. Kristin has created several popular humor destinations online, including the popular Pinterest You Are Drunk and the hashtag asshole parent meme and Instagram account. Kristin is the co-host of Selfie, a podcast dedicated to exploring the mind, body, and spirit aspects of self-care. Thank you so much for coming on. So Kristin, welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Well, thank you so much for having me. That was such a lovely introduction.
Well, thank you so much. Before we dive into everything, and I was really honest about that bestie comment. Before we get into everything, before we talk about all the great things that are going on in your book and what you've been writing about, let's talk about what gets you up in the morning and what got you so interested in talking about parenting without perfection and laying it all on the table in a vulnerable and frankly often hilarious way.
Well, what gets me up in the morning, like most parents, is my children, right? Earlier than I want to be.
Of course, always. I was like, I used to sleep till 12 or 1 when I was a teenager. My kids, they were up at 6:45 this morning. Like,
oh,
what
my
is
word.
that?
I have 1 out of 4 that will sleep in. The rest are like up at the crack of dawn.
Yes.
To answer your question, I mean, I think what really gets me motivated to, or what got me motivated to share my story, is that I felt at the time my kids were small, I felt like a lot of people were not being really authentic online about how difficult parenting was. I was seeing a lot of kind of Pinterest curation and, breezy Instagram accounts of these like perfect motherhood settings. And I was like, man, I am like, unshowered and struggling and barely making it through the day. And so I just really felt strongly that I wanted to be really honest about the experience of motherhood. And I love being a mom. I really do. And there are moments that I find just dazzlingly beautiful, but there are other moments that I find incredibly difficult, and I wanted to talk about all that whole breadth of experience.
Excellent. And it's appreciated throughout your book. In the second chapter of your book, you explain how you were an amazing mother before you had kids. You say, I had it all planned out. I mean, I laughed out loud here, okay? I had it all planned out. There were meadows involved. There would be handmade wooden toys and organic home-cooked meals. There would be picnics on hippie-inspired blankets in the meadows, and vintage books and lazy days at the park, more meadows. I knew the kind of mom I'd be, breezy. I also knew what kind of mom I wouldn't be. And you explained that you had a friend who had poop on her shirt and didn't seem to care. Then something happened. So what happened that changed your perspective on the meadow metaphor? And how has this reality slap been sort of a saving grace for you when grappling with the perfection of parenthood displayed online?
Well, I think that I realized that children are still children even in meadows, right? So,
they're eating the stuff in the meadows.
Oh, totally. They've crawled through duck poop.
Yes.
They're trying to put things in their mouth. And it's that old cliche, wherever you go, there you are. And, you can try to control the optics of motherhood, and you can try to make it look breezy, and a lot of people do. A lot of people do that on social media. But then the backstory is that, it probably took a diaper blowout or a tantrum to get there. Yes. Or if they're teenagers, like I'm parenting now, it probably took a fight and several eye rolls, and like, Mom, this is so lame. Because children are their own people. They are their own entities with their own will, and they don't always comply with the picturesque scenes that we plan for them.
Yes, they weren't involved in creating those. You were. I was just amazed when you were talking about adopting your son from Haiti and how you had like all these hopes and dreams for him, and he looks like not part of those, in the sense that like he didn't have the same hopes and dreams. He didn't love you back in the beginning. He was just like, who the heck are you? And I want to go hang out with my nannies and my friends from where I was, and you're expecting the embrace that the airport, like everybody else that you thinks about adoption overseas, and yet here you are with this child, and it was really quite an event to finally adopt him and get to that point where you had that bond, wasn't it?
It was. And that is a great example of where our intentions at controlling outcomes and controlling optics as parents can go awry, from things as small as, a picnic scene we imagine not going well. But then we all know, and the details may be different, that it can also go really wrong in bigger ways and in more profound and disappointing ways. And, one of the ways that occurred for me is, as you said, when I adopted it was my second adoption. And, he had lived in an orphanage for 3 years, and he had never seen a family life. That wasn't even in his worldview of what family life looked like. The kids who are being raised in orphanages in most third world countries don't really leave the walls of the orphanage. So that's the only life they know. And so when he came home, I, again, had we create expectations as moms, and it's natural. We all do it. And then those expectations are often, not based in reality. And my expectation was that, when he came home, it would be lovely, and we would finally be a family, and he would be, glad to have parents. And he came home, and he was at first kind of like, I don't know who you guys are. I mean, he knew who we were because we visited a lot, but just like, I don't know about this parenting thing. Like, I kind of liked it better when I was less supervised. And when it was a bunch of kids, kind of, Lord of the Flies in the orphanage, and, we didn't have these adults looking after our every move. He didn't necessarily want parents. That wasn't something that he had been pining for because he didn't understand it. And, it's funny to tell this story now because this child of mine is now 13 and is probably the most loving of my four,
Mm-hmm.
probably the most demonstrative,
Mm-hmm.
And we're very bonded, but it took a few years of me just saying, I am a parent and I have to love anyway, which is what we all have to do. All of our kids are going to present things, right, that we didn't foresee, we didn't expect, that we might find challenging, and we love them anyway. We love
Right.
them
You had said something like, how would a loving mother respond to this, right? Something like that in your book. And I that really actually resonated with me, because I often have to say things like that to myself when I feel emotionally reactive, because of course we're going to be emotionally reactive when our child is not doing what we expected or want or hoped for, especially when it's like one of those picturesque thoughts in our head, like you want it so badly to feel like the storybook, and it's so not.
No,
it's not Pinterest worthy.
No, and I think every parent probably has that moment, whether it's a child who struggles in school or a child who has a special need, or a moment in parenting where your teenager is really not happy with you, despite your best efforts, or your toddler's not happy with you despite your best efforts. And I think we've all probably had to have that moment of like, what would I do if I felt loving, even though I don't feel loving right now? Because sometimes we don't, and sometimes love is just a verb. Sometimes it's rolling our sleeves up and going through the motions of being loving, right?
You're so right. I really appreciated how frank you were. One of the areas that you were very open about was your miscarriages and the struggles that you had with infertility. And when I read these chapters, I had such an affinity with what you had gone through. Most of my listeners know by now that we adopted both of my children. They're full-blood siblings. And I've written about the struggles that I've had with my kids and with miscarriages myself. So I was pregnant 4 times and had 4 miscarriages between the years of 2004 and 2008. It was certainly a very dark time in my life, where I felt like the shoemaker's daughter, being a child development specialist who couldn't have children and feeling like babies were being given away like popcorn. That actually came out of my mouth often, as like every one of my friends were getting pregnant and were having babies with like planned components. Like one of my friends actually said to me, I'll be honest with you, Kristen, she said, well, I'm an Aries, so I know that I don't want to have a Pisces, so I'm going to aim to get pregnant on such and such date. And she did, not once, but twice.
Wow.
So anyway, it really resonated with me. I got pregnant 4 times over 4 years. It took me like a year to get pregnant each time, and then I, would have these miscarriages, some of them extremely painful. And thank you for being so detailed with what you wrote in there, because that's exactly how I felt, and exactly how I explained it to people. But let's talk about the unspoken parts of infertility and grief and how you came to adoption.
Yeah, I think that for people who've miscarried, I don't think that there is enough talked about in terms of what that experience is like. At least I didn't find that to be true. Okay, and so I had friends who had miscarriages, but I didn't realize the physical aspects, and I didn't realize the emotional aspects. Like I was really unprepared for both. I didn't understand that, you'd go through a mini labor.
Yeah. When you explained it that way, I was like, oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
And it was interesting. I wrote that chapter, and, my editor found it a little bleak
and jarring. Probably
it's dark. That's I think the word she used. This is really dark. Yes. And she was like, I don't know if we should leave this so dark. And so I threw it out to some other moms who had miscarriages, and every single one of them was like, leave this how it is. I want people to know how this is.
Exactly.
Because you don't realize that, like, you're going to, you might be in a weird stage between kind of being pregnant, but not, or that you might have lost your baby, but the day, the days between the baby, not being viable anymore and then the delivery of that baby could be up to a week. It's a really emotionally and physically difficult endeavor, I found every time. And when you've gone through more than one, the emotions are just really devastating.
Devastating in a strange way, I think. I mean, for me, I went from, just, the ugly cry, the sob that comes from your toes, to my third one where I was like, I don't want flowers. I don't want anybody looking at me. Like, don't even come near me. To the fourth time when I literally was miscarrying on stage while speaking in Las Vegas and needed to after go to the hospital, have them, shoot me in the butt with a needle and just not even I don't know. I was just resolved. I was like, this is just something that happens to me. I was so grief ridden that I couldn't even go there anymore. I was just like, let's just not, it's a really weird experience once you've had multiple ones. Yeah.
It is. And then I really struggled because I did go on to carry to term I got numb, like you said.
Yes.
So by the time I carried to term with that pregnancy, I didn't have feelings about being pregnant. I didn't have the normal emotions.
And you were like, I missed out in the book. You were like, you're almost like you felt disconnected where everybody's glowing and going to the store and doing all that stuff. And you're like, you're not even there. And your doctor's like, nope. Hey, snap to it, girlfriend. You're actually having a baby. You're doing this.
I spent the entire 9 months in a state of, we'll see what happens.
Exactly. I could imagine. I did that every time I got pregnant after a while. But you're just okay. I'm pregnant, but it's probably not going to result in a baby. In my case, it didn't. But I can imagine for you being 8 months pregnant and still not actually knowing if you're having a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh. Yeah. And despite everyone around me being excited,
of course.
Which, that was really hard, I think, for people to understand, which is why I wrote about it so honestly, because I feel like this is such a misunderstood loss, and it's dismissed, I think, more than it probably should be in terms of the emotional weight.
Agreed. And then you came to adoption, and it was not easy. I mean, your adoption process was really challenging. That first one. I mean, the second one was challenging too, but obviously,
both in their own way.
Right, in their own way. This first one from foster care, where you thought you were fostering a child that would be on the fast track to adoption because of terminated rights. And then it turns out that a family member came and, was saying that this person was interested in adopting the child after a year of you having this child in your house and loving this child and being a mother to this child. And then you don't know, you're back on, these rocks. Am I adopting or am I not adopting this child? So what was going on there and how were you coping with that such circumstance?
I mean, I wasn't coping well. I had been beaten up by infertility and miscarriages, and I desperately wanted to be a mom. I had always been open to adoption, so that pivot wasn't difficult.
That wasn't for me either. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah. So I actually always wanted to adopt. So I didn't have a big having to figure that out. That was just okay, well, fourth miscarriage.
Yes.
Okay, just do this.
Now you can see why I was saying we should be best friends. I was like, this girl totally gets me and I get her. It's like, yes. Exactly.
No, that's exactly how I was. Okay, let's
go.
Do a new
Let's go. I actually called my husband who was at the dog park after not the fourth miscarriage, but me trying to figure out what we were doing next. And then I called him up and I was like, I think we should adopt. And he was like, thank God.
Exactly.
I mean, we were all just like, yes. And honestly, that was so, after that, I feel like it was you finally saw these signs. I've been how long does it possibly take you to realize that this was the way you were supposed to go? The universe is screaming at me. And I was like, oh, okay. And it just made so much sense after that. Yeah.
No, I felt the same way. So when we went into adoption from foster care, I knew, because we'd had so much loss, that, I had kind of said to the social workers, like, we don't want to do foster care. We want to adopt a child from the foster care system. And so, we're really only open to children for whom parental rights have been terminated.
Right.
And so, and we were open to, up to age 6, and we were open to sibling sets, but we ended up getting matched with a baby, and, his parental rights had been terminated. And so it was what's considered a fast track adoption, meaning this child is on track for adoption, even though you're foster parents at first. And then lo and behold, about a year into it, a relative, not one of his birth parents, emerged, and, they give precedence to relatives. And so this relative was, he was supposedly going back for, about a year and a half. It looked like he was going to go back, but then it was like months went on and the relative hadn't filled out paperwork or hadn't showed up for a meeting, or, was expressing interest, but not really, which was so infuriating.
It's very strange. Almost like maybe she was feeling like she should be interested, or like maybe was sometimes, and not consistent.
I think she was actually getting pressure from a social worker.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. And so, and it was very frustrating because we just so desperately wanted him. And I kind of felt like, if you want him, show up with your paperwork in hand.
Right.
That's what you do when you want a child.
Right.
If I had a relative in care and it was a child that I was interested in, I would be there at the doorstep of social services the next day.
Right. Exactly. As early as possible.
ID and my paperwork.
Right.
So, it just became more and more apparent that this relative was not actually interested. And so, but, it was a tumultuous and emotional time, just not knowing for a really long time, and then asking myself the questions like, is he really my son? Right. Is this just going to be a baby that I remember? And he never remembers me.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were like, I need to parent as if I'm his mom.
Well, there we go.
It's like, know.
What would a loving mother do? Yes. Even in the moments that I was so scared, it's like, I have to love him as if. Right. I have to love him as if he's going to stay with me forever, because that's what a baby deserves. He doesn't deserve me crying and distancing myself because I don't know if, he's going to get to stay with me or not. It's not about me.
Right.
And
people had some very strange opinions of adoption versus biological children in your world, right? Like, it felt like you were pregnant with another child. You wound up, actually coming to terms with that child, and people were like, well, of course you got pregnant right after you adopted,
I mean, I got a lot of those messages, people were like, oh my gosh, now now that you adopt, you get pregnant, which really doesn't happen to most people.
And it's such a weird thing to say to people. It's just beyond weird.
She wasn't, my biological daughter wasn't the prize for having adopted my son. And then, I feel like there were some messages of well, at least if you lose Jafta, at least you have India. It's like, no, there's no at least. This is my first child. I love him the same. I would, if it's great that I'm so grateful that I had a biological child, but if my first child went back, it would be still a huge, insane loss. There's no mitigation there for that kind of a loss.
Right. Of course not. And people feeling almost like the biological child was the prize for after you adopting a child.
Yeah, that felt yucky. Yeah. Because I don't feel that way at all. And I would have been perfectly happy to adopt all of my children.
Of course. Yeah. You admit that when parenting, and you've got 4 kids, and it can be crazy, and it was when you had so many under 4, that it felt like every day was Groundhog Day, which I definitely we say that here. We literally say that here, the exact words. We actually watched the movie just recently, and my kids were like, "Oh, this is what you were talking about." I often feel like that between the sibling rivalry. I don't know if you have that, but it's definitely front and foremost in my life. Front sibling rivalry and persistent whining can, oh my gosh, and incessant noise, which I know you resonate with, can sort of bring me to my knees some of these days. And then you are left feeling guilty as I sit here and admit this to all these people who are listening in. You feel guilty and you're wondering what's wrong with you, that you're not savoring every moment and counting your blessings and being fully present. And I don't know if you feel this way too. I feel like I'm just speaking to a kindred spirit, but like when it takes so much to have children, whether you adopt them or not, like you feel like you're not even allowed to feel frustrated because it took so much. And like I adopted these children and they're the loves of my life. And yet I can get so frustrated and find myself, frazzled and irritated and just want to be on my own and alone. You're at the time, like you say in one of your chapters, your sister-in-law told you that she likes to watch her kids sleep and admitted, like, don't you feel like your kids can't wait for them to wake up? And sometimes I'm tempted to just wake them up so I can cuddle with them and play with them. To which your thought was like, hell no. So what insights did you gather from this time, and how can you advise those who are listening in, who I'm sure resonate with this, like to stop feeling guilty and full of shame that every moment is not perfect? There's no meadows, or there are, but they've got poop all over them. And that it doesn't always look like the internet says it's going to.
Well, first, I think I would say to any mom who had a difficult journey getting to parenthood, that you have every much as right to complain and whine and have a hard time as as the community of moms that you live in. We are not exempt from finding it difficult, and I think no matter how we got here, it's uniquely challenging to be a parent and to be a mom, and we all have to just give ourselves permission, even those of us who are, and two things can be true at once. We can be insanely grateful for our children and for the journey that brought them to us, and we can also be really tired and speak that. Those can be true at the same time. And then I think it's just giving ourselves permission to speak that, and I think for myself, a lot of that was giving myself permission around my own introversion, which
was so interesting.
That doesn't make us a bad parent if we want to break from our kids. It just means that we need to refuel, and we don't have to feel guilty if we need to take those breaks. It's okay. It's okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this happened with you, but I can imagine with anybody who's listening in who had their kids home 24/7 during this last part of the school year, where, it was like family time all the time. And, getting a break and refueling, it was really challenging. And you find, and I got a lot of messages from people saying, like, I'm finding myself getting so irritable. I hate everyone. Not really, but I'm just so frustrated, and I feel like a terrible person, but like, I just need to get out of here. And they're always here. My husband and I look at each other, we're like, oh my gosh, they're always here. They're always here while we're trying to work, and they're making a lot of noise, and we don't know what to do with ourselves. So, I think you're right. We need to be able to give ourselves permission to feel whatever we're feeling, to feel the frustration, and to know that we're not crazy. We're not bad people because it's happening. And certainly in the time when things are really bizarre and we are, need to be with our children 24/7, that it's not going to be, like the Partridge Family where, you get to live and work together and everything's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. Yeah. And, I feel the same way that the last few months, it was really challenging. Yes. I mean, I found myself struggling to sleep at night just because I hadn't had, of course, some of it is the stress of, what's happening in the world. Of course. But some of it is just like my brain can't shut off because I haven't been alone and I don't even know how long.
Right.
Yeah.
And just being on call.
Yes. And, and having to, I had to work through the whole quarantine
Me too.
time, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah. So it was funny. I mean, I'm watching
hard.
people on Instagram baking bread, and I'm like,
Oh
I
my
don't know
gosh,
that life.
the baking, I was trying to bake bread at the same time, like almost. Like, I mean, I wasn't baking bread, but like
Yeah.
I still like remember my daughter being like, "Mom," and I'm like up here, in my office working. "Mom," I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Can you come down and help me bake cookies?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I actually can't." And how I wish I could. Like, I wish I could, but I so can't. And I'm almost irritated right now that you're asking me this, because I need to be able to, concentrate on this presentation that I'm writing, that I need to do online now, not in Las Vegas, but it's so challenging I saw people literally baking something different every single day. I'm like, just amazed by that life.
Well,
wow.
And there is that pervasive, guilt and mom guilt and mom comparison too, because I felt like I'm watching people do all of these lovely things with their kids.
Beautiful.
And I'm like, all I've done today is stared at a computer screen and then yelled from the computer screen directives to my kids. Like, that's what quarantine looked like for me.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it is hard not to feel guilty. Like, for me, it wasn't so much the baking the bread, but like people who were basically going out to meadows and, taking pictures of their kids jumping and, having their hair just perfectly right. And I was like, I don't know if my child has brushed her hair today. And I'm really, I'm not sure exactly what's going on downstairs. So there's a lot of noise, and I'm sure there's a huge mess, but I'm not really sure exactly what's going on. But I can't. I just tell my kids, I can't do all the things. Like, I want to do all the things, but I cannot do all the things.
I know. No, you can't. No. You can't. And I think, my book has had a message of letting ourselves off the hook, and I had to follow that advice during quarantine. It's just going to be messy. It's going to be a hot mess.
It was messy.
Yeah, it was messy. The house was messy. The grades weren't the best.
Yeah. It turned out
work
it didn't
wasn't
matter.
the best.
Yes. No, I completely get it. So, during the quarantine, obviously, there was a whole lot going on, and I did get to interview some really amazing people. One of them was Nefertiti Austin, and she was recently on the podcast, and she was talking about raising a Black son in today's world. She also adopted her son from foster care. And since you have two Black sons, one who you adopted from foster care, one who you adopted from Haiti, as well as two biological children who are fair-skinned, you tell us about racism that you've witnessed and parents who have made assumptions about how to best raise kids who don't see color, or who, quote unquote, can't be racist because we don't mention skin color. And you say sometimes good kids from non-racist homes can have moments of being terrible. You told some really interesting stories. I'd love to hear them here. What insights can you give us about how to raise kids who are anti-racist, who understand more about racism, who can support their friends who might be on the receiving end of racism, since you have a unique perspective, given that you have two Black sons and you have two children who are fair-skinned, and you've seen it sort of from all angles?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most problematic things I see in terms of messaging that kids are getting is don't talk about race. Like, don't mention, we're colorblind. Mm-hmm. Everyone's human. We don't notice race. Mm-hmm. We don't talk about race, mm-hmm. which sends a subtle message, especially to white children, that race is problematic. Like, oh, well, if we can't talk about this, there must be something
taboo,
bad, right? Like, there must be mm-hmm. something bad. Mm-hmm. And, I've had so many parents over the years tell me stories, especially when the kids were all younger, of like, my child doesn't even notice your child's race. Like, she mm-hmm. didn't even know your child was adopted. And mm-hmm. it's like, well, I think they notice that they have brown skin. They mm-hmm. may not understand genetics yet, but mm-hmm. like, it's not an insult if your child notices my child is brown.
Right.
That's not bad. That we're not looking for.
I mean, that's Sesame Street, isn't it? Like,
right.
That's basically like this is brown, this is purple, this is yellow.
Totally.
Like, we're okay with it, right?
Yeah, we're totally okay with it. And my kids are very proud to be Black, and I don't want people to feel like they can't acknowledge that aspect of them. So I think we have some work to do as white people in just becoming comfortable about talking about race, because we've gotten these messages that say, and I think they were well-meaning messages, but they're not working for us. This colorblind notion is not working for us. We need to acknowledge race. We need to talk about race. We need to listen to the experiences of people who are different, we need to listen to the experiences of people of color as white people. Absolutely. So that we can understand how their experience is different from our own, and so that we can empathize, because that's really the goal, is empathy.
I know you had mentioned in your book, and this resonated with me because I did this. You were saying, make sure you're purchasing dolls that have different skin color. As a body image expert, I had written a book on body image, and my daughter was like interested in Barbies at the time. I'm like, I am getting every different color. I am getting, every different size. There was like a plus size Barbie. There were small ones. There were teen ones. There were, Lottie dolls that had like different ethnicities and different interests. I was like, we're going to get a whole cross section,
Totally.
So when she was playing with them, she had like all these different ones to play with. Cause I was like, how am I going to, allow her to do what she's interested in doing without me cringing every time she's doing it, because everybody looks the same. But what were some of your ideas for how we can help to incorporate more of a diversity in the lives of our children and ourselves, so that we're not just talking about racism, we're actually doing something?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a young age, it's, as you mentioned, it's making sure that diversity is reflected in the home. So doing an audit of your books, doing an audit of the dolls, doing an audit of the shows that your kids watch, and making sure that all of them represent people of color, Black people, Asian people, Latin people, that you are really representing the wide array of people in our world. And then I think as kids get older, I mean, I think it's also really important to have them in diverse settings. And so, making sure that you are putting yourself out there, and that your friend groups reflect the diversity that's in the world. And that if you are routinely and regularly in all white spaces, asking yourself some hard questions, do we need to look at a different school setting? Do we need to look at a different church? Do we need, what is going on in our life if everywhere we go all the time is all white?
Yes, this is really important. And I think it was really wise of you to talk about those tough questions. Why is it that way? And what do you need to be doing differently? And are you housing some racist views, or are you having that birds of a feather kind of thing in your head, making it so that you're just, as you said in your book, like, boys typically hang out with boys, girls typically hang out with girls, but do we have to have everybody segmented in all of these different ways where these kids are going to hang out together, and we need to do some kind of we have to look at it in a different way and see how we can infuse some diversity into our lives and know that we'll be better for it. Isn't that
absolutely right? Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, you mentioned this part of the book. I mean, I said that I think we want to believe that racism is only taught, and that any kid who acts in a racist way, has parents who have taught them to be racist. Right. But I think that sometimes kids exclude based on appearance and gender and disability. They exclude children who are different. They do. And it's a very terrible exercise in power and exclusion that kids go through. But, we've all seen kids on a playground be like, no, girls only.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know,
Yes.
we've seen kids make fun of a kid with glasses. That doesn't happen because the parents have said, we hate people with glasses, right? Or no parent has sat a kid down and said, now don't ever let a boy come into your play group if it's just girls, you know?
Right.
Kids can be terrible, all
Yes.
of our kids.
Right.
And they are getting subtle messages about race from our environment. They are.
Right.
And they're getting subtle messages from us. If we don't have friends of color, then what are we modeling for
Right.
them?
And I think along those same lines, you know, you have to shut it down when you see it. And so much of the time, and even in the stories that you tell in your book, it's like parents are in so much of denial
Yeah.
when they hear that their child has done something awful or said
Yeah.
something awful, like it can't be my kid, right? When it's really an opportunity to say, all right, my child's 4 years old. And in this case, like in one of the stories of your book where, you know, you're talking about the basketball activity, and nobody wanted to hold your son's hand because he was black or brown or whatever they said. We don't want to touch brown people or whatever the kid said. I mean, it was awful. That the parents were just, you know, you're talking about a 4-year-old child or 5-year-old child. Like, you know, you have to get to a point where you're like, the child's been on earth for 4 years, 5 years. Like,
Right.
they know nothing. It's like, I mean, they know some things, but they don't know much. And that's fine. So, like, you know, it's not even something to be offended by. It's something to like, oh, okay, I guess I haven't really talked about that. Like, let's talk about that and take it as an opportunity. Is it embarrassing? It can be embarrassing, but then you just cop to it and be like, you know what? Like, I need to do something about that. Thank you for telling me, right? I mean, at some point, you just have to kind of take it in and realize, as you said in the beginning, like, life is messy. Our kids are not going to be perfect. We're so far from perfect. Clearly,
Right.
you know, we're wearing poop on our shirts. So, you know, we need to do something about this.
Yeah, and I think white parents need to not be so defensive that at the idea that their child could do something racist. Now, that doesn't mean their child is a racist.
Right. Oh, that's really different. That's something to take in right there. They could do something racist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are racist. Let's put high beams on that. Yes.
Yeah, but I think, you know, it's well within the realm of possibility that a white child will do something racist in their childhood. It's, you know, that could happen. And then we look at it and we adjust and we have a talk and we go, okay, let's have a chat about why, you know, when you guys were all playing and then that child who didn't speak English as well as all of you came along, you told them that they couldn't play or, you know, whatever it looks like, that we acknowledge that our kids might behave in ways that are not anti-racist.
Right. Okay. Really, really good discussion on that. So you also talk about this whole idea of like this hashtag asshole parent movement you created. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how you think, and I believe it did, helped to release some of the tension around perfect parenting?
Yeah, I mean, so I was having one of those moments with my daughter. It was just the two of us, my youngest. The older kids had gone off to school, and she was very bored and lonely because all of her siblings are in school and she's not. And so there was one day where I was trying to have like a special lunch with her, and I had put everything on a pink plate. We had like leftovers from a birthday party. So it's like, you're getting lunch on a pink plate, and it's cut in puzzle shapes, and here's a pink cup, and you can wear your princess dress, and you can invite all of your stuffed animals to lunch. And it was just this cute little scene. But then
it was a Pinterest scene.
It was a Pinterest scene. I'd like cut her grapes down the middle and I'd made her a pink smoothie. But then I put a yellow straw into the pink smoothie.
You're a horrible
and
person.
she lay down on the ground and cried because of the pink, the yellow straw. Like, how dare I?
I mean, really.
And I remember just thinking like, I cannot do anything right. Like,
No.
It doesn't matter how hard I try.
Yes.
They think I'm an asshole no matter what I try.
Yep, absolutely.
And so that's where Asshole Parents was birthed, was this idea that, you know, despite our best efforts, you know, one of us is going to hand a kid a broken granola bar and they're going to lay
terrible.
on the floor about
There's
it.
clearly cannot be edible at that point once it breaks.
Gosh.
No.
I mean, it's broken in half.
It's
like throw the whole
not
thing
even
away.
in half. Like it might even be like not quite half, which makes it worse. Yeah.
Just burn it down. So I started like sneaking photos of my kids in moments where they were throwing a fit over something so ridiculous, like, a piece of cilantro in a burrito. And I started, describing what happened and then using the hashtag asshole parents. And then it just took off and people started doing it. And I think that there was this sort of camaraderie of like, we have to laugh about it. Like you have to laugh about it,
Right.
because it is comical. It is
And
funny,
it's not just your kid.
It is universal.
Yeah.
It is every kid.
It's every kid that and we all know it because we go to the store and the kid is lying on the ground and having a tantrum and we're like, yep, like I've been there. And the people who look at you with, that look of disgust either don't have children or don't remember because it's just it's been everybody's child that has had a tantrum in a random place. It might even been on your kitchen floor, but still it happened, and it may have happened over a yellow straw, or you cut the sandwich wrong, or their sister took something that they wanted but never did they express it. It just that
or the
rock.
best, my favorite is when the fit is over you, like saving them from death, right? Like, so the fit is that you won't let them play with a power tool or stick a fork into an outlet.
Right, and stand on the countertop. Like, how dare you? How
monster.
Dare you? Monster. Yeah. No, I love that part. Before we get to the end, you mention in your book this idea of having mom friends and taking risks to acquire them. I feel like I definitely need lessons in this. I'm going to speak to people all the time, and I present, and and I'm talking to amazing people on my podcast. But I often feel the way that you describe, where you're like, I don't really have too many people like right here in my midst. To when you're like, we go on vacations together, I'm like, I definitely don't have that. Like, I would love that. That's like a dream come true. So what's your advice for parents who are feeling lonely and are seeking real friends, but aren't really sure how to acquire them because everybody else looks maybe kind of perfect, or they have their friend group already, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been there, and I think it is, I mean, the sad reality is it's something that you have to work at, like the way that you would work at any goal. Like if it's a goal to make more friends, and this is exactly what I did, is you have to literally put that goal on your to-do list and figure out what you're going to do to meet that goal. And for me, what that looked like was I really put myself out there, like super awkwardly, like dating, right?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And it is like dating. It's like you're not going to find a partner if you stay at home, like, and it's funny that we sort of get that about dating, right? Like that you have to put yourself out there.
Yes.
And you have to, you might have to, it might be awkward and it might be forced at first, but you have to go out there and, figure out the things to do to find the partner. But we don't do that with friendships.
No, because you think you're just going to meet somebody in a meadow, right?
Well, it's because it is organic.
But it's like Anne or Green of Gables or whatever. Like you're like, oh, my bosom buddy, like right in the middle of the meadow.
Probably never had to work for them because you just find your friends in elementary school.
Well, my mom told me that don't worry, you'll find your mom friends when you have kids, and like the kids at preschool or you're like or in kindergarten or whatever. Like it will be really obvious. And I'm like there are nice people here. There's no question. There's people I even see, but like what you described about having this like mom group with like people who go on vacation together and hang out, and no, like I definitely don't see that happening yet. And I was really like, wow, that sounds amazing.
But yeah, I mean, to get there, because I didn't have it. I mean, I can remember a point when my son was in first grade. I was like, I don't have the number of a single other parent at this school. Like if there was like an early out day, or I needed someone to grab my kid in an emergency, like I didn't know a single other parent. And I hated that. And so I wrote about this in the book. Like one thing that I did was I invited all of these moms from the school to have mimosas at my house the first day back of school.
Right.
And so I just I invited literally everyone, and like 50 women showed up.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
pretty impressive.
But then what happened was 5 women lingered.
Yes.
And that group, about half of those women are like my ride or die now.
So great.
Yeah.
So great.
But I had to really, really put myself out there. And this looked like me sitting in my house with mimosas, wondering if anyone would come.
Oh,
it was really.
You were a risk taker. I love it. I think that is outstanding. You put yourself out there like that.
Well, you know what's funny? I'm actually not really a risk taker. I'm a goal setter.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't like doing that, but I knew if I really had to tell myself, if friends are what I want, and I desperately wanted it, then I have to make goals for it the same way that I make goals for I'm going to write a book or I'm going to, anything else in life. Like I have to make a to-do list for how I'm going to make friends. And that's what I did.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So give us your top tip. What do you want the people who are listening in to come away with after listening to what you have to say about learning to parent without perfection?
My biggest tip, and I write about how I did this specifically in my book, in terms of what I did, but I think it's different for every mom. But my biggest tip is that you have to figure out what you're opting into and what you're opting out of as a mom, because we cannot do it all, right? We can't be the PTA president and be an entrepreneur that runs her own business and be the hippie yoga mom and be, the domestic goddess whose house is always perfect. Like we have to figure out what our lane is and what are the things that we're giving up in order to have the things we want. And it's different for every mom. But I think we have to figure those things out. And we have to opt out of some of those expectations of motherhood.
That's such a great one. And the caveat is also like, let's not judge other parents for having a different view of what they're opting in and out of. If the people who are the PTA presidents or treasurers and involved in that way, and that is awesome. We know the parents who are
them.
Yes, parents that are stay at home who do all the great Pinterest things, and I'm so impressed with what they do, or the parents who are working and just trying to stay above water, and there's all different kinds of moms and dads, and we just have to kind of salute them and say, you do you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That is the truth. That is the truth. And, I think sometimes the reason that we do judge other moms is really out of jealousy. It's really that we are feeling badly that we're not doing the things that they are doing. And when we can really let ourselves off the hook, and when we can really make a conscious effort and say, I'm choosing to opt out of being on the PTA. And when it's my choice, then I don't feel the need to judge a woman who's opted in, right? And so when we are more conscious with our choices, I think it does reduce our mommy wars, because then we can say, I've chosen this and she's chosen that, and that's great.
Yeah, we need all kinds. We need people who are, baking the cupcakes.
We do.
And we need the people who are taking care of the kids. And I like to, bring food to people. Everybody's got a different, thing that they're doing. We're all just trying to do our best. Give us the resource of the week. Where can we go to get more information about you, your book, and the great work you're doing?
Yeah, it's all linked up at my website, which is KristinHowerton.com. And I'm also on Instagram. My personal account is Kristin Howerton, at Kristin Howerton. And then all of the asshole parents memes are curated at Rage Against the Minivan on Instagram.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Kristin. I loved what you had to say about adoption, about infertility, about letting things go, opting out, opting in, asshole parents. It was such an interesting conversation. There were, times where we really got into some deep things and some really funny things. So I really enjoyed myself, and I hope you did too. So thank you for being on the show.
I really did. Oh, it was my pleasure.
I'm so glad. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours, so let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook. You can go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page, or let's chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/drrobyn. I'm also on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman. I'll be going back and forth with Kristen, talking about all these great things that we've been discussing today, also creating memes with some of her amazing quotes. I will slap them on those memes. You can share them all over social media so that other people can learn about these funny things, these interesting things, these really important things. And if you loved this podcast like I did, I hope you'll go up to iTunes and rate and review it so other people can learn about these solutions and these insights and use them in their own homes. I truly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today, my fellow parents, leaders, and educators. Thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com. There's so many great podcasts up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this, you're here, you're getting the information you need. I know it's not easy, but never forget there's always tomorrow. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. Perhaps you heard something today and you're thinking, oh, my goodness, I now have some new perspective on that mess up that I made, that mistake, what happened with my kid. I have some new things to apply to my life about racism or adoption or foster care. That's awesome. You can always do something different. You can take this information and apply it to your life and enrich it and make it better. You don't have to be bashing yourself. There's always time for the do-over. I see you and I'm right there with you. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you are 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.